This media is brought to you by Polyscope.
In the realm of tomorrow, where tech meets mind, we ponder, we dream.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us here on Think Future. My name is Chris Kalaboukis, and once again, we're coming at you live from deep in the heart of Silicon Valley, California. And today we have a very special guest. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about?
All right. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so my name is Brian Herr. I've had many roles over the years. I've been in the industry over 30 years now. So I've seen a lot of changes, and boy,
Have things changed, right?
have
It's
things
insane.
changed. But it's funny how some things are repeating what we'll say some of the issues of the past. For passions, I'm very much into technology and being a bit of a futurist. And over the years, I've spent time in technology and security, and now I'm also spending time on the other side, which is helping tech startups, AI startups, security startups get to where they need to go. And then I'm also working with some of the venture funds to basically scout out who's next, what's great, and where things are going.
Nice. So have you done this the whole time, all 30 years in the business, or did you just recently get into that piece of it?
So most of that time, I've worked for companies that are tech startups or scale ups. So I've worked with, and then as they've exited over time, I've gotten to know many of these funds.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been in the last 20 some years. So both venture capital and private equity, which they have different thesis, but now everyone's kind of working together. It all comes back to how do we make a business that runs with, on, or through technology.
Right. So you've seen a transition of a lot of things over the last 30 years. What would you say is some of the biggest trends that you've seen, like the differences between where we were and where we are today?
I think really what we're seeing is the evolution of how we interface with our tools and technology, right? If you
Mm.
go and this is why I think it's very interesting. A lot of people are, really have this kind of stance of they don't understand the whole idea of AI, how it fits into our world. And I say, hey, take a pause. You go back in time, we had cables and punch cards to interface to computers.
I remember
Right?
doing punch cards in high school. We had the only, like one of the few punch card machines in the entire school district. Did you use punch cards too?
I didn't. I worked at a company that still had some punch cards, and then everything else was reel to reel. And then, as you made your way through the green screens,
Oh my God.
right?
I remember those.
But every time there was an evolution of the interface that made us more efficient with the technology, there's always that time that where people are trying to adjust and learn how they will work in this new modality of interfacing to technology. And then we can go through the whole history into directly interfacing, programming. Now we have prepackaged apps all the way up through the internet age. We're at that point now with AI, and this is where I tell people when it comes to our individual use of AI, a lot of times it's meant to be a more natural interface. I tell people, look back, and there was a point where we stopped typing in CLI commands for everyday tasks, and now what do? We touch a screen, we speak to our devices. We're moving things on. It's all about how do we tactically and interface better, more efficiently with outcomes via technology, right? You look at what we do with our phones today. It's changed, and now what we're doing is we're evolving, and this isn't all that new. I did a presentation about a year or 2 years ago on this very topic. Like, look at classic sci-fi. Humankind has always imagined the day when we would be able to converse with the technology and outcomes would happen. We just weren't prepared that it could happen. And
We
that's
never
what's
are.
happening, right? A lot of people still have a certain degree of fear, right? I don't believe we've hit AGI yet. We're not
No.
there. The models are better at predicting what's next, understanding how we use language, natural language, to communicate, right? If I give people examples, like look at what you can do with some of these voice platforms today, even 12, 18 months ago.
Yeah.
It's changed, it's evolving. It's to the point where my 80-some-year-old mother-in-law would rather converse with an AI prompt with whatever service she's using than actually try to figure out a traditional user interface.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
The world's
Well, I think
evolving that way.
exactly, and I find it interesting that you're kind of right, because I think what's happened is that it was super genius of them to use a chat interface for AI, because that is how human beings talk. I mean, we've
Hmm.
been doing this unnatural interfacing with technology all of this time since, I mean, if you think about it, when we first started, it was like you said, it was CLI prompts. We were basically giving the machine commands and it would come back to us with responses. And then that made its way to Windows and made its way to GUIs and made its way to TAP, made it to all these sort of almost unnatural interfaces to human beings. And then now we're back to what we had before, which was how we talk, how we converse with other human beings is the same way we converse with AI. So it's much more natural for us to be talking to AI the way we're talking today is how we would talk to other human beings.
Exactly. And when I speak to executives, there's still some that just don't quite understand it. And I was sitting, so I just finished my program with Columbia Business School. So they have a whole
Oh,
program on
congratulations.
venture. Yeah, thank you. That was a lot of work. I was in one of the sessions with a lot of executives from all over the world, great group of people. And I had this gentleman, a CFO, sitting across from me. And he's like, I still just don't understand how to interface with this new technology. I said, have you ever had an intern, a very smart, ambitious, sometime over eager to please intern? It's like, oh, yeah, I've been doing this for 40 some years. I've had a lot of them. It's like,
Hmm.
great. Treat your AI, your personal AI, as that intern.
Exactly.
Structure. What does it look like? What does success look like? The guardrails. This is where people have to really understand, it's that experience of what should it look like, what are the guardrails. My experience guides into what does good look like and how do I get
Hmm.
things there. The the models are evolving to get there faster, but it still requires that degree of judgment. And when I explained it to him that way, he literally came back the next day and said, I have changed the way I prompt. I said,
Mm.
yes, you're going from trying to do specific tasks to being more of a command and control of getting to outcomes.
Yeah.
You have to change that mentality, and when people get it, they tend to get there. Now, this gets back to that whole discussion of it's a very helpful, smart intern. They can get into trouble, and you still have to have people that understand enough of the technology under the hood that can detect when things get into trouble.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's probably a whole nother area of growth that's going to be happening over the next 5 to 7 years.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I've been feeling that really well through vibe coding. So I have a couple projects that I've been vibe coding, and I'm doing these things, and I can see the holes
Hmm.
as they come up. So you can see what needs to be patched. You can see what needs to be fixed, because I've experienced this stuff for over 30, 40 years that I've been working in this business. But if you give this to a marketing professional, I mean, they might get something that looks great, but there's going to be holes all over it. There's going to be security
Hmm.
issues all over it. It's almost like I love the intern analogy. I've used that one myself, but it's like an overeager, very egotistical intern that thinks it knows
Yes.
everything, but it doesn't know everything. And in fact, it really, and it's missing a lot of key pieces of information that only a human who has experience can fill in. That's what I find.
And, and you're spot on. I still do quite a bit of fractional works, CIO, CISO, CTO, right? We've been in the industry a long time. We can fill a lot of shoes. And I recently had a case where it was a chief revenue officer was doing things, and the results came out great. And then we kind of took the pieces under the hood back to the development team. And I said, guys, this is a great start. And they're like, we can't use this. I said,
Mm.
actually, you can. You have to understand, for years, we've always tried to figure out the magic that's in the mind of the marketing team. Like, what are they trying to accomplish? Because words and simplistic pictures weren't enough.
Yep.
Now we're in an age where, with the right technology, they can give us very specific and very mature, models of what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish, what they're envisioning. And then we as humans can take that last 10 to 20% to the next step in viability.
Yep.
And I had this conversation with another one of the startups I'm working with right now, and they're in the independent film space. And we were out to lunch and we're talking about, of course, AI because it's everywhere. And they wanted to know my thought. And it was very interesting, their viewpoint, because depending on whether they were on the technology or the business side was like, hey, that's potentially taking away from the experience of film. The technologists say, hey, there's an enablement, but I don't think it replaces film. And
Mm.
I said, the answer is really in the middle. And I've seen this for a couple of projects where using AI tools gave us certain specificity, a certain color and fullness to a proposal. So it's almost like we've gone from the days of a very flat, colorless storyboard of an idea to an enriched media, fully fleshed out idea that has text, video, slides, animation, a lot of context behind it that's unprecedented. So this takes me back to, guys, I know everyone talks about how AI is going to replace people. I think we're going to see the pendulum swing.
Mm.
It's really going to be about how this very specific use case of AI enabled tools are going to augment creative people, technologists, everyday tasks. We're going to get to that point of, I want an outcome. I send it to the tools. I get something back that's very close or spot on, and then allows me to do the higher functioning things.
Yep, absolutely right. And I think we there's a couple things there. It's like we tend to take new technology and just run with it. Like we
Mm-hmm.
run with it. It's kind of like I like to uh, give the music industry as an example. So do you remember when they first came out with synthesizers and electronic music, right? So
Yeah.
we went way into the weird synthesizers and strange sounds and stuff like that. And then that got tiring. So we went back and we said,
Mm-hmm.
well, that's not going to work. So we stopped. We didn't do any that much anymore. And then somebody figured out sampling. And then as soon as they figured out sampling, they said, oh, you're using computers to create the sound of a real instrument. Then that blew up again. So the technology became sampling as opposed to the beeps and boops of synthesizing. So we went really far into the synthesized music, and then we realized we pulled back and said, well, maybe this technology could be used in a different way, in a more human way, and that's what ended up happening. And it's the same thing with AI. Like we leapt into it, feet first, thinking this is great, and then
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing the boundaries now, and we're starting to pull back and go, okay, this definitely needs more human oversight. This net needs more human oversight. This needs more human injection into it.
Yeah, and that's tracking all over the place. It used to be the race of the most generalized AI models out there, and now what I'm seeing is we're moving to machines, local computers that can run models, so I can have very specific use case or fit for use models for my, agentic workloads, things that I can do locally. Or, I was just working with another startup that's doing very specific AI use in the financial industry,
Mm,
which you start using very large training bases, you get a lot of slop, ambiguity. There's issues with it because when you train on models that has that much data, you can't tightly control the influence to what makes your model work,
right.
right? The training is very, very important. We've always said this. And now we're to the point where you have the larger training and then you have a very specific secondary training. Well, these guys are saying, hey, let's get more into a very narrow fit for purpose training on this model. The secondary condenses it, makes it more efficient. And then as part of that process, we have the observability as part of it because that's how we would work with an intern. show me your work.
Yes.
It can't be a black box, especially in regulated industries. So when I saw what they were doing, I said, you guys get it. You
Mm.
understand where this is going to go. It's like the days in the cloud, right? Everything was in the cloud and it wasn't in the cloud. Now we found where things make sense. Now some companies are still cleaning up the everything went to the cloud and we didn't know what we were doing. Your mess for less moved out.
Yeah.
We're starting to see the same thing with the use of AI. And I tell people, it's like, it really is, it's another application and a user interface and automation, right? It fits into those pieces. I have AI for the use of by the individual, right? This is the internal users. Then we have more of the enterprise or commercial space. This is something that's serving, sits, does what we typically associate with enterprise applications, customer service, maybe interfacing with our applications. Those are two use cases. And I think although they're related, they're going to continue to separate over time, and you're going to see that really grow. But it is changing, and this goes back to the startup space. I've within the last quarter actually had conversations with companies where I've had to ask them, tell me about your API or MCP strategy,
Mm.
because what you do and the data you have, that's your moat. The AI that you think you're wrapping around, that's becoming commoditized at a much more unprecedented rate.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's so many. I mean, is every startup an AI startup now? I mean, are you encountering anyone that doesn't use AI in what they're doing?
The ones that are really, really smart are figuring out when's the right time to use AI and when's the right time to use machine learning,
Hmm.
and focus on your outcomes. I had one company that we're an AI company. I said everyone's an AI company, and with a little bit of vibe coding,
You got to have those little two letters somewhere in your deck.
right? And I said, really, tell me about the value you bring. The reason I trust you as a company, that you figured out all the things that is a barrier to me adopting your solution. And then tell me that you utilize the best in technology and AI as an afterthought. And we did a pitch with a venture company. So one of the firms I work with, and they said, it's refreshing that you came to me with an actual solution and it wasn't just another AI wrapper.
Hmm.
And that's where it is. As it's becoming easier and easier, one of the questions I ask in the rubric when I'm, finding companies to get investment, I said, explain to me what you bring to the table that isn't going to be replaced by a Claude skill or an agent in 6, 8 months.
Yeah, that must be a very small number then, because I have a feeling that a lot of these startups sort of live or die by their being a wrapper on a regular
And
model.
you've nailed it. You're going to see definitely a flattening of some of the AI enabled startups. It's going to feel a lot like the bubble, like we did during the dot-com period, right?
Right.
We were down there. We were
Hmm.
around for that. You're going to see that because there are a lot of companies that are simply a wrapper and they're not bringing the rest of the value to the table. And then you do see some others. I ran into one. They almost never talk about the AI they have on the back end.
Mm.
They lead very much into, this is what we do, this is how we do it, this is how we integrate with these enterprise systems, this is how we bring down the cost of manufacturing. They just get into the whole business case, and is just kind of off to the side. Those guys got a ton of movement, ton of traction, because it wasn't an AI wrapper. And that's the one thing I'll tell people: the venture the venture capital firms are looking for AI safe investments right now,
Mm.
because everyone is a wrapper, and anyone can start something. I can vibe code up an app myself right now while we're on this conversation.
Yeah, it's I
It
did
doesn't
one.
mean it's solving a
I
problem.
did one yesterday. It took me about 30 minutes to vibe. I mean, it still needs more work, but it's amazing how quickly you can get something to a usable MVP, like within
Right.
within a very short period of time.
Which has now caused a very large opening of the pipeline where venture capital used to, you really have to they always have to sift through a lot of ideas, but they would use traction and capability as one of the big levers to figure out viability.
Right.
That's not accurate anymore. Now it's the other side is, do I worry about how it works under the hood? Do I worry about whether it's going to be a model? A lot of people think AI is the moat. It's not.
No.
We're and it's changing the way we view technology, but it also is uncovering the next evolution of how are people going to use the technology and who's going to use the technology. That's as we're going through all of this, you're going to, and this is something that's just historically always happened. The institutions that train and educate the next generation of technologists are always way behind these evolutionary, step ups that we're seeing. It
Oh yeah, absolutely. Way behind.
way behind. So now we're to the point of people are worried about AI taking their jobs. Really, it's automating tasks and things like that. We can get into the whole discussion of whether people, whether organizations are laying off under the guise of AI. I've yet to see a good case study where for larger organizations, it wasn't used as an excuse,
Yeah, it's
you
totally an
know?
excuse. It's totally an
Right,
excuse because AI is not quite there yet. I mean, work for major corporations and the complexity of those environments. I mean, AI could never do what we do. I
right.
think.
On the same note, I am seeing organizations that are smaller, more nimble, really get AI enabled first for
Oh, for
their,
sure.
and what they can produce with the smaller headcount is amazing. And I think it's going to be really hard for some of the larger organizations, like you mentioned, they're so complex. It's going to be hard to re-engineer their human processes, their technology processes to be fully AI enabled. I think they're going to get specific use cases and then they're going to continue to move on at a pace. These smaller, more nimble companies, they have a lot they can do with a smaller headcount, a smarter headcount. We've all worked with companies, they hit a certain size and they seem to kind of lose their identity because it's just how that organization works has become so disparate and so segmented. Now keeping the team smaller, and I saw one organization where their tech teams, they literally have created a repo of all the things they've learned and shared between all of their AI agents and coding and everything they do.
Nice.
It's high efficiency. Now I jokingly said we should map that out because they created the Borg of AI, right? Resistance is futile, but it makes sense. The
I
biggest
love it.
thing is when you're trying to get things done quickly, humans typically get in the way, but I want their knowledge. But now I have a barrier of time, experience, exposure, and how they explain a problem and how they solved it to me versus how I interpret it. Whereas if I can just take the work that they did, everything they've learned, and they put it into their whatever repo is they use for their AI coding agents, and I can directly access that, that's a huge efficiency piece.
Fantastic.
That allows me to move fast.
Yeah. So, what are you saying is like tracking right now in this space? Like, what's popular? It's like it's just more AI wrapper stuff, or is there anything specific that's hot at the moment?
I think you're starting to see companies that are AI wrappers. They're either going to pivot and really get into what is it they bring to the table that's the rest of the story
Right.
and the rest of the value, or they're going to fail out from underneath them. What I'm seeing as the next iteration is people who really have good ideas
Mm.
are going to be focusing on where the digital and physical world meet and using the latest in models, automation, and that easier user interface, right? The natural language models to interface with. They're going to be reinventing some existing business processes, business problems in that way. They're the ones that are going to absolutely crush it because one, it's not always easy to bridge the physical data and digital gap.
Oh, super difficult. That is a huge, huge challenge.
So that's going to be a big piece that's moving forward. The smart organizations are going to be focusing on we're in the middle of the wild, wild west,
Hmm.
and I've seen so many things go horribly awry. That the technology that's going to get security and governance around the the application of AI and automation at the enterprise level, but also as it becomes agentic and closer to me, the user. And how do I validate and move data? All of those things happen. And ultimately, the companies that are going to win can have good observability and build actual trust.
Hmm.
That's the biggest thing that's happening right now is I've seen some of these guys, these startups, very brilliant. What they bring to the table comes up, and I'm like, but can I trust it?
Yeah.
And we do a little fact finding. It's like not completely. At
No.
least with the person, I had other indicators. We as a species have evolved to look for certain signs of can we have a conversation? Can we talk about it? Do I have enough body language or basically external signals that tells me I trust what you're saying? And then can I go validate and I built that trust and then I will trust you going forward. We're at that phase now. We're trying to do that with the technology. And I had this conversation with a good friend of mine literally yesterday where he's working with certain models and he's doing some of the work himself and he's comparing the two and he's finding the models because of the way ultimately it works, right? It's predicting.
Hmm.
It brings in a large swath of knowledge and might bring things to the forefront that he didn't think of because we've all learned different paths. But ultimately, some of the things that came up weren't correct.
Mm.
And it's not easy to query and say, how did you come to that? And have it give you the response you're looking for. Now that's changing. But if we're going to continue to move the AI to the point where it is making more and more autonomous decisions and we're giving it more agency, how do we have the right observability, governance, and trust? Because at the end of the day, and this is something I remind everyone about, the actions taken by that AI platform, device, entity, agent, what have you, it's still acting on your agency. So
Exactly.
you are responsible. I am responsible for what my AI does. The company I work for, if we have an enterprise application utilizing AI, we are held responsible for what it does, just like you would for an employee.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's time to think like a futurist. It's the year 2036, 10 years from now. Where do you think we're going to be in 10 years? I mean, obviously things are moving so quickly, it's hard to predict. Where do you think we'll be?
I, you know, I've thought about that quite a bit because things are changing a lot, but they're also back to being more of the same.
Mm.
We're going through another, evolution, just like we did with, the different cycles that we mentioned, even more recently, the cloud and all that fun stuff. We're going to see the pendulum start to come back. We're going to see more of the fit for use AI that's closer to me as an individual, right? It's already becoming prolific, but you're going to see very specific use cases. You're going to see us evolve into more efficient ways of interacting with our technology. And I think you're going to also see us evolve into the idea of more of the AI co-pilot in
Mm.
our daily lives. And especially where the technology meets the physical realm, I think you're going to see that in the biotech industry even more. Because as we learn more about how we make the interface better, we're going to get to the point of saying even the tactical or tactile, voice recognition, that interface will eventually not be enough. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to see how do we start removing that the biological barrier to interface. We're already starting to see it now with some of these projects. I think that will become more mainstream, and we'll just expect that our platforms can respond to uh, basically educated prompts in our interface. Because at the end of the day, we all laughed when, this is going back in time here, when we saw Scotty pick up the mouse and say, computer, computer. We're getting there. We're getting there. We're to the point now that, we maybe still be typing prompts or there's products out now that the natural language has really come much further. In 10 years, that's going to really take off. And now we're going to talk about how do we make sure that technology not only is closer to me in the regular devices, you're going to start seeing about more of technology in the physical world, maybe in our own biological presence. And that neural interface is going to be probably the next boundary that they're going to be really looking at.
Oh, I'd love to see that. I can't wait for that. And the other piece of it is all of our assistants are still tied to big tech companies. Do you think we're going to
Mm-hmm.
ever, I mean, I can see it starting to happen, but when will we have our own personal assistant that sort of sits on our side and talks to everybody else? Is that soon?
Yeah, we're starting to see that now. I was just in a conversation of, OpenClaw versus, was it NanoClaw versus Hermes. We're still early on some of those, and we're seeing more of the agentic move. But we're definitely there where you're going to see people running just a local AI models right within the gear. I mean,
Yeah,
even new computers, you saw NVIDIA's newest release, the releases with Apple, and the processing power required is being put into all the machines now.
yeah,
It's happening. We're moving
yeah,
models closer to where the data and the user is. And then very specific use cases will continue to be augmented or hosted in some kind of cloud presence.
right. Exactly right. Awesome. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
The best way to get a hold of me, we can do LinkedIn. Hit me up there. You'll see my wonderful smiling face there. And then, you know, I do a lot of work in the startup community, so you can find me at brian.her at startingblocks.io, and we can talk about the latest in technology and where the future's going.
I love it. Well, I'll put all the links in the show notes so people can go directly to you. Thank you so much. This has been great. Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks, Chris.
Talk to you later.
Pixels and philosophies merge and mold, a future untold, unseen.